So book 17, test 1, reading, and the topic is the development of the London Underground Railway, right? So when we do it in the class, our reading lessons are slow, where we understand words, what it is trying to say. But when you're doing it fast, when you're doing the actual test, you're supposed to go faster, not like the way we are doing. This is just for your understanding and learning કે કઈ રીતે solve કરવાનો, કઈ રીતે એને સમજવાનું ને understand કરવાનું. એટલે reading skills તો practice સાથે strong થશે. અને અત્યારે આપણે જે કરીએ એમાં ટેકનિક યુઝ કરી કે કયા ક્વેશ્ચન ને કેવી રીતે સમજીને carefully solve કરાય. All right, so to read the first paragraph, Drashti, please read the first paragraph.
Okay, sir. In the first half of the 1800th century, London's population grew at an astonishing rate, and the central area became increasingly congested. In addition, the expansion of the overground railway network resulted in more and more passengers arriving in the capital. However, in 1846, a royal commission decided that the railways should not be allowed to enter the city, the capital's historic and business center. The result was that the overground railway stations formed a ring around the city. The area within consisted of poorly built, overcrowded slums, and the streets were full of horse-drawn traffic. Crossing the city became a nightmare. It could take an hour and a half to travel 8 kilometers by horse-drawn carriage or bus. Numerous schemes were proposed to resolve these problems, but few
succeeded. So in the first half of the 1800s, Jenny, which century it is? The 19th century, right? London की जो population थी वो बड़ी बहुत रफ्तार से, that is astonishing rate. In the central area, जो बीच का जो main downtown area था, became increasingly congested, एकदम गीच થઈ गयो. In addition, उसके साथ the expansion of the overground railway. Overground means जो जमीन पे जो railway था network resulted in more and more passengers arriving to the capital. Because जैसे इंडिया में सब लोग मुंबई जाते तो वैसे everyone was coming to London. However, in 1846, so what is it? It is the middle of the 19th century. A royal commission, यानी government नहीं थी तब, कौन था? The Queen. तो उनका order था decided that the railway should not be allowed to enter the city. तो उन्होंने क्या किया? The capital's historic and business center में railway को नहीं आना चाहिए. And the result was the overground railway stations formed a ring around the city. यानी उसकी limit आ गई तो वो आजू-बाजू city के आजू-बाजू हर जगह पे जमीन के ऊपर वाले railways थे overground. The area within, यानी अंदर का जो area था वो पूरा घिच-घिच, poorly built, overcrowded slums, and the streets were full of horse-drawn traffic, घोड़ा बग्गी. Crossing the city became a nightmare. जैसे मुंबई में अगर ट्रैफिक में फंस गए तो क्या होगा? तो वो जमाने में लंदन में वही हालत थी. And it could take an hour and a half to travel 8 kilometers by horse-drawn carriage, that is घोड़ा बग्गी and bus. Numerous schemes, बहुत सारे ideas निकाले गए, were proposed to resolve these problems, but few succeeded. Right? So let's look at the questions here. We have fill in the blanks. Let's read all the fill in the blanks. Our condition is choose one word only. So the London Underground Railway, what was the problem? The dash of London increased rapidly between 1800 and 1850. कौन सी चीज बड़ी थी? क्या बड़ा? रेलवे बड़ा था? स्क्रीन नहीं देखा थी? Screen is visible. Screen नहीं visible बताएं. Are you guys able to see the screen, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what was the dash of London that increased rapidly between 1800 and 1850? First sentence. You see here, the first sentence gives us the idea. In the first half of the 1800, the keyword here 1800, क्या बढ़ा? the population of London grew. So your answer is population. So that was the problem. Not problem, but now one thing you can see here, ये जो fill in the blanks है, आपको overall आपने जो अभी पैसेज पढ़ने वाले हो वो पैसेज का पूरा आइडिया आपको यहीं पे मिल रहा है. कैसे मिल रहा है पता है? बिकॉज ये बोल रहा है कि पहला पैराग्राफ प्रॉब्लम समझा रहा है, दूसरा पैराग्राफ है द प्रपोज्ड सॉल्यूशन. सो नाउ यू ऑलरेडी हैव अ समरी कि व्हाट इज द सॉल्यूशन एंड द कंस्ट्रक्शन, एंड व्हाट इज द कंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ द अंडरग्राउंड रेलवे, राइट? सो यहाँ पे सॉल्यूशन लाने में एक बंदा है चार्ल्स पियर्सन, अ सॉलिसिटर यानी एक लॉयर, suggested building an underground railway. उसका आइडिया, building the railway would make it possible to move people to better housing in the dash. यानी अगर अच्छा रेलवे होगा तो लोगों को कैसी अच्छे घर में ले जाएंगे, लेकिन कौन सी जगह? तो सबको पहले तो सिटी में ही रहना है बिकॉज वहीं पे ट्रैवल नहीं करना है किसी को. तो अगर अच्छी रेलवे मिलेगी लोगों को तो वो अच्छे घर में जाएंगे जो सिटी से कहाँ होंगे, दूर रहेंगे ना. तो better housing in dash. So dash means you are looking for some area far away from the city, but it has to be one word. Then a number of dash agreed with Pearson's idea. बहुत सारे डैश ने पियर्सन के आइडिया से अग्री किया. तो कौन होगा? लोग होंगे ना. कैसे लोग होंगे? तो वो लोगों की टाइप, पॉलिटिशियंस, citizens, a number of people agreed with Pearson's idea. The company initially had problems getting the dash needed for the project. प्रोजेक्ट के लिए कौन सी चीज कलेक्ट करने में कंपनी को प्रॉब्लम हुई? तो कौन सी चीज होगी? ऑब्वियसली मटेरियल हो सकता है या फिर मनी, राइट? फंड हो सकता है. एंड नेगेटिव आर्टिकल्स अबाउट द प्रोजेक्ट अपीयर्ड इन द डैश. नेगेटिव आर्टिकल्स छपे कहां पे? मैगजीन हो सकता है या फिर न्यूज़पेपर. द फाइनल कंस्ट्रक्शन, द चोजन राउट, जो रूट था, जो रास्ता था, डिड नॉट रिक्वायर मेनी बिल्डिंग्स टू बी पुल्ड डाउन. तो उसमें बहुत सारी बिल्डिंगों को गिराने की जरूरत नहीं थी. द कट एंड कवर मेथड वाज यूज्ड टू कंस्ट्रक्ट द टनल. टनल को बनाने के लिए कट एंड कवर. एंड विद द कंप्लीशन ऑफ द ब्रिक आर्क, आर्क वाला जो पूरा ब्रिक से बनाया, द टनल वाज कवर्ड विद डैश. टनल को किस चीज से कवर किया गया? ब्रिक आर्क એટલે what is an arc? This is the arc. આમ હોય ને આમ, અને શું કહેવાય? આર્ક એટલે ઈટ નું બ્રિક બનાવ્યું, આ કર્વ ईट थी बनाવ્યું આ લોકો, ઇમેજિન, રાઈટ? તો ટનલ ને સેનાથી એ લોકોએ કવર કર્યું. ઓલરાઈટ. And we also have true, false and not given. So other countries had built underground railways before the metropolitan line opened. हमने अभी तक सॉल्व भी नहीं किया है, तो we'll just look at the question कि दूसरी कंट्री ने अंडरग्राउंड रेलवे ऑलरेडी बना दिया था जब ये मेट्रोपॉलिटन लाइन खुली. More people than predicted traveled on the metropolitan line on the first day. जितने लोग हमने सोचे थे उससे ज्यादा लोग उस लाइन पे ट्रैवल किए. The use of ventilation shafts failed to prevent pollution in the tunnel. Ventilation shafts जो बनाए वो काम नहीं करे, वो कामयाब नहीं रहे. जो pollution tunnel में आता है उसको निकालने के लिए जो shaft बनाए. So it's like a grill where you know all the pollution in the tunnel will go out. A different approach from the cut and cover technique was required in London central area. दूसरी टेक्निक की जरूरत थी other than cut and cover. The windows on city and South London trains were at eye level. The windows on city का और South London trains की जो eyes थी, windows थी, वो एक ही लेवल पे थी. They were at eye level. And last, trains on the Tuppenny tube nearly always ran on time. वो ट्रेन हमेशा टाइम पे चलती. Now we have all the questions. Let's continue reading. So what is going to come? The solution, right? कौन solution लाने वाला है? Charles Pearson. All right. So let's read. Romil, go ahead and read.
Among the most vocal advocates for a solution to the London traffic problem was Charles Pearson, who worked as a solicitor for the city of the London. He saw both social and economic advantages in building an underground railway that would link the underground railway station together and clear London slums at the same time. His idea was to relocate the poor workers who live in the inner city slum to nearly constructed suburbs and to provide cheap rail travel for them to get to work. Pearson's idea gained support among some businessmen, and in 1851 he submitted the plan to Parliament. It was rejected, but coincided with a proposal from another group for an underground connection line, which Parliament passed.
Among the most vocal advocates यानी जो बोलने वाले advocates, वहां पे क्या लिखा है? Solicitor. Solicitor is synonym for advocates. For a solution, यानी जो बोलने वाले जो advocates थे, जो solution ढूंढ रहे थे London's traffic problem, उसमें से एक बंदा था Charles Pearson, who worked as a solicitor for the city of London. He saw both social and economic, यानी सामाजिक फायदा और आर्थिक फायदा उसने देखा in building an underground railway that would link the overground railway stations together and clear London slums at the same time. यानी ऊपर का पूरा कचरा हट जाएगा, लोगों को निकाल देंगे और रेलवे लाइन की जो प्रॉब्लम है सारी सॉल्व हो जाएगी, सबका फायदा होगा. His idea was to relocate the poor workers, जो वहां पे जो गरीब मजदूर रहते थे चालियों में, झुपड़े में, who lived in the inner city slums to newly constructed suburbs. कहाँ पे ले जाना था उनको? सबब यानी रेजिडेंशियल एरिया, लेकिन वो अच्छा रहने वाला जो एरिया होता है जहाँ पे भीड़ भाड़ पोल्यूशन नहीं होता है, दैट इज अ सबब. एंड टू प्रोवाइड चीप रेल ट्रैवल, यानी उनको आराम से वो लोग ट्रैवल करके आ सकते हैं फॉर देम टू गेट टू वर्क. यानी लंदन में काम करना है, मजदूरी करनी है फैक्ट्री में, लेकिन रहना उनको सिटी से दूर है, तो उनको रिलोकेट करने से क्या हुआ? पूरा जो भीड़ कचरा था सब निकल गया. So Pearson's idea gained support among some businessmen. उसको businessmen का support मिला. And in 1851 he submitted a plan to Parliament. Parliament ने उसके plan दिया, लेकिन उसका plan was rejected. But it coincided. Coincided means at the same time किसी और ने propose दिया with a proposal from another group for an underground connecting line, जो Parliament ने pass किया. So answer the next few questions. Proposal: Charles Pearson, a solicitor, suggested building an underground railway. Building the railway would make it possible to move people to better housing in the dash. Answer. Anyone? Suburbs. I just taught you. What is it? The suburbs. A number of dash agreed with Pearson's idea. Businessmen, not advocate. बिजनेसमैन कौन थे उसको सपोर्ट करने वाले? बिजनेसमैन थे ना. So look at the answers here. Where are the answers? The first answer lies here. Relocate them. कहाँ पे relocate करना था? To newly constructed suburbs, and so he got support from some business. Gracie, can you read the next para?
The two groups merged and established the Metropolitan Railway Company in August 1854. The company's plan was to construct an underground railway line from the Great Western Railway Station at Paddington to the edge of the city at Farringdon Street, a distance of almost 5 kilometers. The organization had difficulty in raising the funding for such a radical and expensive scheme, not least because of the critical articles printed by the press. Objectors argued that the tunnels would collapse under the weight of traffic overhead, buildings would be shaken, and passengers would be poisoned by the emission from the train engines. However, Pearson and his partners persisted. Can I read, sir?
Yes, go ahead.
The GWR, aware that the new lines would finally enable them to run trains into the heart of the city, invested almost £250,000 in the scheme. Eventually, over a 5-year period, £1 million was raised. The chosen route ran beneath existing main roads to minimize the expense of demolishing buildings. Originally schemed to be completed in 21 months, the construction of the underground line took 3 years. It was built just below street level using a technique known as cut and cover. A trench about 10 meters wide and 6 meters deep was dug, and the sides temporarily held up with timber beams. Brick walls were then constructed, and finally a brick arch was added to create a tunnel. A 2 meter deep layer of soil was laid on top of the tunnel, and the road was above rebuilt.
The two groups, यानी कौन सा ग्रुप, चार्ल्स का ग्रुप और दूसरा ग्रुप मर्ज्ड, वो सब मिल गए. यानी चार्ल्स का आइडिया था लेकिन दूसरे ग्रुप का आइडिया प्लान जो था वो फाइनल हुआ. They merged and established the Metropolitan Railway Company in August 1854. यानी उनकी कंपनी बनी. ये कंपनी का क्या प्लान था? To construct the railway. The company's plan was to construct an underground railway line. नीचे से लाइन बनाना from the Great Western Railway, that is GWR station at Paddington, to the edge of the city at Farrington Street. A distance of almost 5 kilometers. That was the first plan, underground. The organization had difficulty in raising the funding. उनको तकलीफ कहाँ हुई? Raising the funding for such a radical and expensive scheme. ये एकदम नई चीज थी, महंगी थी, तो फंडिंग के लिए एक तकलीफ हुई. Not least because of the critical articles printed by the press. Press वालों ने उनके लिए negative articles लिखे, उससे उनको तकलीफ हुई. Objectors argued, जो लोग उसका विरोध करते थे, उनका ये argument था that the tunnels would collapse under the weight of traffic overhead. कि ये जो tunnels बना रहे हो आप, ऊपर के ट्रैफिक की वजह से सब टूट जाएंगे. Buildings would be shaken and passengers would be poisoned by the emissions from the train engine. Train engine का जो धुआं होगा, वो अंडरग्राउंड लोग उसमें धुएं से मरेंगे, ऊपर की बिल्डिंग हिलने लगेगी, या फिर ये पूरा टनल जो है वो कोलैप्स हो जाएगा. However, Pearson and his partners persisted. यानी उन्होंने फिर भी ये चीज को कंटिन्यू किया. Alright, so here a number of dash agreed that the company initially had problem getting the dash needed for the project. They had problems, not funds. It says funding. So your answer is funding. Negative articles about the project appeared in the dash, in the press. समझ पड़े छे बधाने? कोई स्टोरी जो है तो फोन फेंकी देवा बार. The construction. Now we are talking about the construction. The GWR, aware that the new line would finally, यानी the company, कौन company थी? The Great Western Railway, aware that the new line would finally enable them to run trains into the heart of the city. अभी उनको confidence आ गया कि वो लोग आराम से चला पाएंगे. Invested almost 250,000 pounds in the scheme. Eventually, over a 5-year period, 1 million was raised. उतना पैसा इकट्ठा हुआ. The chosen route or route ran beneath existing main roads के नीचे बना to minimize the expense of demolishing buildings. यानी रोड के ऊपर ही बना, नीचे ही बना, क्योंकि अगर बिल्डिंग के नीचे बनाए तो बिल्डिंग तोड़नी पड़े. तो रोड के नीचे ट्रेन थी. Originally scheduled to be completed in 21 months, the construction of the underground line took 3 years. The time उनको ज्यादा लगा. It was built just below street level using a technique known as cut and cover. यानी उस जमीन को कट करो और फिर कवर करो. A trench का मीनिंग होता है गड्ढा, लेकिन लंबा टनल जैसा. About 10 meters wide and 6 meters deep was dug. उसको खोदा गया and the sides temporarily held up with timber beams. लकड़े की बीम से sides को उन्होंने खड़ा रखा. Brick walls were then constructed. Brick की wall बनाई गई वो trench के अंदर. And finally a brick arc was added to create a tunnel. उसके ऊपर क्या हुआ जो हमने arc का discuss किया. A 2 meter deep layer of soil, मट्टी का जो layer था उसके ऊपर लगाया गया, was laid on top of the tunnel and the road above rebuilt. उसके ऊपर फिर वापस उन्होंने road बना दिया. So last answer. The chosen route did not require many buildings to be pulled down. The cut and cover method was used to construct the tunnels. With the completion of the brick arc, the tunnel was covered with dash matti. So that is soil. Are we clear till all 6 questions? All right. Let's see if we can answer some of the true and false. First one. Other countries have built underground railways before the metropolitan line opened. उससे पहले दूसरी कंट्री ने ऑलरेडी अपना ओपन कर चुके थे. No discussion of any country, so there is a possibility किसी और ने किया होगा, नहीं भी किया होगा, we don't know. So answer is not given. अगर ऐसा लिखा हो कि भाई it was the first railway line to open up, then this would be a false. अगर लिखा हो कि कोई चाइना ने ऑलरेडी उससे पहले बना दिया, तो this would be true. Other countries had built underground railways before them, and they say China had already created it 20 years back, so this will be true. अगर लिखा है कि ये जो था मेट्रोपॉलिटन लाइन, it was the first one, this would be false. और दोनों चीजें नहीं लिखी गई है, that is why this is not given. All right, let's continue reading. Binal, can you read next para?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
The Metropolitan Line, which opened on 10 January 1863, was the world's first underground railway. On its first day, almost 40,000 passengers were carried between Paddington and Farrington, the journey taking about 18 minutes. By the end of the Metropolitan's first year of operation, 9.5 million journeys had been made.
Continue.
Even as the Metropolitan began operation, the first extensions to the line were being authorized. These were built over the next 5 years, reaching Moorgate in the east of London and Hammersmith in the west. The original plan was to pull the trains with the steam locomotives using fire bricks in the boilers to provide steam, but these engines were never introduced. Instead, the line used specially designed locomotives that were fitted with water tanks in which steam could be condensed. However, smoke and fumes remained a problem, even though ventilation shafts were added to the tunnels.
So even as the metropolitan, so what happened here? The metropolitan line, जब वो उनकी rail line खुली, which opened on 10 Jan 1863, was the world's first underground railway. वो क्या था? दुनिया का पहला underground railway था. Now, does it come anything here? Other countries had built railways before metropolitan line opened. That is not given here. But what does this say? Metropolitan line जब वो खुली was the first. Now, does this give us any idea now? तो ये not given क्या हो गया हमारा? Other countries had opened. अभी उन्होंने बोल दिया कि ये first था. So now your answer becomes not given. It becomes false. Be ready to change your answer based on the information you get. Right? और यहाँ पे लिखा है कि वहां पे उस दिन on the first day 40,000 passengers were carried between Paddington and Farrington. The journey was 18 minutes की journey थी. इतने लोग आए थे. By the end of the Metropolitan's first year of operation, 9.5 million journeys had been made. इतने लोगों उस ट्रेन के ऊपर सवार हो चुके थे. Does it compare anywhere कि इतने लोगों का prediction किया था और उससे कम आए या ज्यादा आए? Now your answer for the next one, 8th one, is not given. More people predicted. No discussion about the prediction. It was a huge number, yes, but we don't know whether they had predicted it or not. That's a not given. Even as the metropolitan began operation, जैसे ही उसने चालू किया, the first extensions to the line were being authorized. यानी जैसे चालू हुआ वैसे ही ट्रैक्स को लंबाने का, बड़ी और जगहों पे ट्रैक्स अंडरग्राउंड रेलवे बनाने की आइडिया ऑलरेडी ऑथराइज हो चुकी थी. These were built over the next 5. अगले आने वाले 5 सालों में और बहुत सारी रेल लाइंस अंडरग्राउंड खुली, reaching Moorgate at the east of London and Hammersmith in the west. दोनों साइड पे एक्सटेंशन आ गए. The original plan was to pull the trains with steam locomotives using fire bricks in the boilers to provide steam. क्या आइडिया था? To pull the trains with steam locomotives, यानी steam engine use करके trains को चलाई जाए using fire bricks in the boiler to provide steam. But these engines were never introduced. Instead, the line used specially designed locomotives, ऐसे locomotives and train engines थे that were fitted with water tanks in which steam could be condensed. यानी जो steam निकलती थी उसको वो condense कर सके. However, smokes and fumes, जो धुआं निकलता था, remained a problem even though ventilation shafts were added to the tunnel. Ventilation shafts तो थे, लेकिन फिर भी वो एक problem थे because that was not enough. Coming to the next one, the use of ventilation shafts failed to prevent pollution in the tunnels. उससे कोई फायदा नहीं हुआ. That's true. That is why they needed another one. So this one, ninth one is true. समझ पड़े छे बधाने? Let's read ahead. Mais, can you read the next paragraph? Mais.
Although the technology to create this tunnel,
From here.
So, despite sir,
Yeah.
despite the extension of the underground railway by the 1880s, congestions on London Street had become worse. The problem was partly that exciting underground lines form a circuit around the center of London and extended to the suburbs, but did not cross the capital center. The cut and cover method of construction was not an option in this part of the capital. The only alternative was to tunnel deep underground.
Despite the extension, यानी उन्होंने रेलवे का एक्सटेंशन कर दिया, अंडरग्राउंड रेलवे का, by the 1880s, ये कहानी स्टार्ट हुई थी 1800, राइट? तो यहाँ 80 years के ड्यूरेशन में क्या हुआ? कंजेशन यानी जो ट्रैफिक था ऑन लंडन स्ट्रीट हैड बिकम वर्स, यानी उनकी प्रॉब्लम और बढ़ चुकी थी. The problem was partly that the existing underground lines, जो underground lines थी, formed the circuit around the center of London. वो लंदन के आजू-बाजू थी and extended to the suburbs, but they did not cross the center's capital center. लेकिन ये रेलवे लाइन जो थी वो सिटी सेंटर में तो नहीं आती थी, वो पैसेंजर्स को कहाँ उतारती थी? सिटी के बाहर. यानी सिटी के बाहर से लोग अंदर तो ट्रैवल करके ट्रैफिक में ही आते थे, रोड पे ही चलते थे, तो उनको अभी सिटी के नीचे अंडरग्राउंड रेलवे की जरूरत थी. The cut and cover method of construction was not an option. और यहाँ पे वो लोग नहीं कर सकते in this part of the capital क्योंकि बिल्डिंग्स बहुत ज्यादा थी. तो कट एंड कवर यानी कोई भी स्ट्रीट का गड्ढा बना के वो टनल नहीं बना सकते. So the only alternative was to tunnel deep underground, यानी बहुत अंदर, बहुत गहरा. So answer this question. A different approach from the cut and cover technique was required in London central area. एक दूसरी टेक्निक की जरूरत थी उस समय. Answer is true, क्योंकि cut and cover technique was not suitable for that place. And last one, although the technology to create these tunnels existed, वो टेक्नोलॉजी थी कि वैसे टनल बनाए जाए, steam locomotives could not be used in such a confined space. और वैसे steam locomotives को वहां पे ऐसी बंद जगह पे यूज नहीं कर सकते थे. It wasn't until the development of a reliable electric motor, वो electric motor जब बनी, and a means of transferring power from the generator to a moving train, that the world's first deep level electric railway, the City and South London, उसका नाम था the City and South London, became possible. यानी तब तक वो नीचे जब तक, क्योंकि वो स्टीम है तो स्टीम को ऊपर ही रखना पड़ता है. क्यों ऊपर रखना पड़ता है? क्योंकि धुआं जो है वो बहुत अंडरग्राउंड होगा तो नीचे फंस जाएगा. तो उनको ऐसी चीज, ऐसी रेलवे लाइन से जो इलेक्ट्रिसिटी से चले. अगर इलेक्ट्रिसिटी है तो धुआं नहीं है. तो ये कब हुआ? जब उन्होंने रिलायबल इलेक्ट्रिक मोटर बनाई, और वो बनाया कि नीचे अंडरग्राउंड डीप लेवल पे वो लोग इलेक्ट्रिसिटी पहुंचा सके, ट्रांसफरिंग पावर फ्रॉम द जनरेटर टू द मूविंग ट्रेन. और तब जाके उन्होंने बनाई द वर्ल्ड्स फर्स्ट डीप लेवल इलेक्ट्रिक रेलवे. उसका नाम था City and South London became possible. The line opened in 1890. So that was when 10 years later, and ran from the city to Stockwell, south of the River Thames. The trains were made up of 3 carriages. 3 यानी 3 डब्बे वाली गाड़ी थी, and driven by electric engines. The carriages were narrow. उसके डब्बे जो थे वो narrow थे and had tiny windows. उसकी छोटी-छोटी windows थी just below the roof because it was thought that passengers would not want to look out of the tunnel walls. उनको ऐसा लगा कि छोटी बारी की जरूरत क्यों पड़ेगी क्योंकि पैसेंजर्स को बाहर देखने का कोई शौक नहीं है. The line was not without its problem. यहाँ भी उसकी प्रॉब्लम थी, mainly caused by an unreliable power supply. तो उस जमाने में अगर लाइट चली जाती है तो ट्रेन वहां पे अंधेरे में बंद. Although the City and South London Railway was a great technical achievement, it did not make profit. उनका कोई profit भी नहीं हुआ. Then in 1900, and again 10 years later, the Central London Railway, known as the Tuppenny Tube, जो नई रेलवे लाइन आई, began operation using new electric locomotives. और फिर जाके it was very popular, and soon afterwards new railways and extensions were added to the growing tube network. और फिर ये बढ़ता गया. By 1907, the heart of today's underground system was in place. और आज जो लंदन में हमें अंडरग्राउंड रेलवे मिलती है उसका जो मेन हार्ट था वो 1907 में ऑलरेडी बन चुका था, यानी आज से 120 years ago, around that time. So answer these questions. The windows on City and South London trails were at eye level. वो आंखों के लेवल पे थी. उन्होंने बारी तो लगाई थी लेकिन बहुत ऊपर हाइट पे लगाई थी. So answer is false. Because railway line की बात की है ना, eye windows की बात की है. The City and South London Railway was a financial success. False. They were not able to make any profit. And last one, trains on the Tuppenny Tube nearly always ran on time. Not given. We have no discussion whether the trains were on time or not. So that is it. That was the reading passage. So second passage here, stadiums, past, present, and future. Looking at the heading, what can you imagine? What is the first picture that comes to your mind? We talk about stadiums. So when you talk about the past, have you seen the movie Gladiator? Gladiator Josh? There is a very big Roman arena and people are fighting inside. People are not just fighting, they are fighting each other to death. एक बिचारे मारीना, वो fight था, and there are people cheering. So we're talking about stadiums in the past, stadiums in the present that we have right now, and stadiums in the future. So let's start with this. Vinal, can you read a paragraph?
Yes, sir. Stadiums are among the oldest form of urban architecture. Vast stadiums where the public could watch sporting events were at the center of Western city life as far back as the ancient Greek and Roman empires, well before the construction of the great medieval cathedrals and the grand 19th and 20th century railway stations which dominated urban skylines in later eras. Today, however, stadiums are regarded with growing skepticism. Construction costs can soar above £1 billion, and stadiums finished for major events such as Olympic Games or the FIFA World Cup have notably fallen into disuse and disrepair. But this need not to be the case. History shows that stadiums can drive urban development and adapt to the culture of every age. Even today, architects and planners are finding new ways to adapt the monofunctional sports arenas which become emblematic of modernization during the 20th century.
Very nice. Stadiums are among the oldest form of urban architecture. यानी शहर का जो विकास होता है और शहर में जो चीजें बनती है उसमें सबसे पुरानी जो एक रूप है that is the stadiums. यानी बड़े बड़े सिटीज में एक चीज क्या होती है? स्टेडियम्स. अहमदाबाद जाएंगे आप, लंदन जाएंगे, everywhere in every big city there is always a stadium. Vast stadiums where the public could watch sporting events were at the center of Western city life. वो सिटी लाइफ के बीच में थे, जब लोग जहां पे देख सकते थे, as far back as the ancient Greek and Roman empires, well before the construction of the great medieval cathedrals. यानी चर्च बनाने से भी पहले क्या बना था? Stadiums. The grand 19th and 20th century railway stations which dominated urban skylines in later eras. आगे के जमाने में क्या हुआ? रेलवे स्टेशंस बने, राइट? बट उससे सबसे पहले यानी चर्च, रेलवे सबसे पहले सबसे पुरानी जो चीज है दैट इज द स्टेडियम. टुडे हाउएवर, लेकिन आज के जमाने में स्टेडियम्स आर रिगार्डेड विद ग्रोइंग स्केप्टिसिज्म. व्हाट इज अ स्केप्टिक? स्केप्टिक मींस डाउट. आज उसको डाउट की तरह से देखा जाता है कि डू यू गेट ROI, दैट इज रिटर्न ऑन इन्वेस्टमेंट. यानी अगर हम इतना पैसा खर्च करके एक स्टेडियम बनाते हैं तो क्या हमें उसका रिटर्न मिलता है? Skepticism means you got the idea. What is it? Skepticism, लोग उसको डाउट की नजरों से देखते हैं. Construction cost can soar up to above $1 billion, and it can be very expensive. And stadiums finished for major events, यानी जो स्टेडियम बड़े बड़े इवेंट के लिए बनाए जाते हैं, फॉर एग्जाम्पल ओलंपिक गेम्स और द फीफा वर्ल्ड कप, यानी वो वर्ल्ड क्लास स्टेडियम होता है. जब उसको बनाया जाता है तो ऑब्वियसली यू नो इट इज लाइक द सेंटर ऑफ अटेंशन फॉर द होल वर्ल्ड. लेकिन उसके बाद एक बार इवेंट खत्म हो गया, उसके बाद क्या? उसको मेंटेन करना बहुत महंगा है. एंड दे हैव नोटेबली फॉलन इनटू डिसयूज एंड डिसरिपेयर. फिर उसका कोई देखभाल नहीं करता है, वो ऐसे ही पड़ा रहता है. यानी गवर्नमेंट इतना सारा पैसा खर्च करने के बाद क्या होता है? इट इज अ वेस्ट. बट दिस नीड नॉट बी द केस. लेकिन ये एक ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. History shows that stadiums can drive urban development and adapt to the culture of every age. हर स्टेडियम में ये एबिलिटी होती है कि वो अपने जमाने के साथ उपयोगी बन सके. इवन टुडे architects and planners are finding new ways. बनाने वाले लोग नए तरीके ढूंढ रहे हैं to adapt the mono-functional sports arena. मोनो या का मीनिंग होता है सिंगल. तो मोनोफंक्शनल यानी स्पोर्ट्स अरीना जब सोचता हूं ऐसा ही सोचते कि इसको स्पोर्ट्स के लिए ही यूज किया जाए, तो उसको चेंज करके अडेप्ट द मोनोफंक्शनल स्पोर्ट्स अरीनास व्हिच बिकेम एम्ब्लेमेटिक ऑफ मॉडर्नाइजेशन ड्यूरिंग द 20th सेंचुरी. यानी उसको सिर्फ एक ही चीज के लिए यूज नहीं किया जाना चाहिए, उसको मल्टीपल चीज के लिए यूज कर सकते हैं. यानी सेम जगह पे हम कॉन्सर्ट्स कर सकते हैं, कई सारी चीजें कर सकते हैं. तो यहाँ पे ये जो पैसेज है इसमें हमने दोनों चीजें देखी. स्टेडियम के बारे में बात देखी कि इट इज वेरी ओल्ड, फिर उसके बारे में हमने नेगेटिव व्यू देखा, और फिर हम मॉडर्न की बात करें, मॉडर्न जमाने. यहाँ पे हमारे पास है क्वेश्चंस. सो द फर्स्ट पार्ट ऑफ द क्वेश्चन इज which section contains the following information. You may use any letter more than once, which means alphabets can be repeated. So for 14th one, a mention of negative attitudes towards stadium building projects, of figures demonstrating, figures means numbers, demonstrating the environmental benefits of certain stadium. एक स्टेडियम का बनाने का environmental benefits के figures कहाँ दिए गए हैं? Examples of the wide range of facilities available at some new stadiums. आज के जमाने में जो अलग अलग फैसिलिटीज जो मिलती है स्टेडियम में, उसके एग्जांपल्स. रेफरेंस टू द डिसएडवांटेज ऑफ द स्टेडियम्स बिल्ट ड्यूरिंग अ सर्टेन एरा. एक जमाने में बनाए हुए स्टेडियम्स का जो डिसएडवांटेज है उसका रेफरेंस कौन से पैराग्राफ में है? सो व्हिच वन डिड वी रीड राइट नाउ? क्या हमने कोई पैराग्राफ के बारे में पढ़ा? इसमें से कोई लाइन that matches to the first one? Yes, correct. A mention of negative attitude. Negative attitude के लिए कौन सा word use किया हमने? Remember? What is it? Skepticism. That is negativity. Skepticism. Right? All right. Let's read the next one. Gracie, can you read B paragraph?
Yes, sir. The amphitheaters of Arcades in the southwest France, with a capacity of 25,000 spectators, is perhaps the best example of just how versatile stadiums can be. Built by the Romans in 90 AD, It becomes a fortress with 4 towers after the 5th century and was then transformed into a village containing more than 200 houses. With the growing interest in conversation during the 19th century, it was converted back into an arena for the staging of bullfights, thereby returning the structure to its original use as a venue for public spectacles. Another example is the imposing arena of Verona in the northern Italy, with space for 30,000 spectators, which was built 60 years before the Arcades amphitheaters and 40 years before the Rome's famous Col- Colosseum. It has endured the centuries and is currently considered one of the world's prime sites for opera, thanks to its outstanding
Acoustics.
acoustics.
Now we have the talk. It talks about the amphitheater of Arles. What is Arles? Arles is a city in southwest France with a capacity of 25,000 spectators. What is the meaning of spectators? શ્રોતા જે જોવા વાળા દર્શક હોય ને એને શું કહેવાય? સ્પેક્ટેટર્સ. જે સાંભળવાળા હોય એને ઓડિયન્સ કહેવાય. જોવા વાળા હોય એને શું કહેવાય? ઓડિયન્સ. ઓડિયન્સ બધામાં આવે. જેમ કે કપિલ શર્માના શોમાં આવે તે બધા શું હોય? ઓડિયન્સ હોય. પણ ઘણા સાંભળતા બી હોય રેડિયો પર, એને પણ ઓડિયન્સ કહી શકાય. તમારી બુક વાંચવાવાળા લોકોને રીડર્સ કહેવાય. સબસ્ક્રાઇબર્સ હોય યુટ્યુબ વાળામાં. પણ જે જોવા માટે આવે સ્ટેડિયમમાં એવા લોકોને કહેવાય સ્પેક્ટેટર્સ. So spectate, કોઈ COD રમેલો હોય, કોલ ઓફ ડ્યુટી માં સ્પેક્ટેટિંગ મોડ આવે, એમાં ખાલી જોવાનું બધા. અને સ્પેક્ટેકલ્સ આવે જોવા માટે. It's perhaps the best example of how versatile stadiums can be. જે એમ્પી થિયેટર છે એ કેટલું વર્સેટાઇલ, એટલે કેટલું મલ્ટીપર્પઝ. વર્સેટાઇલ નો મીનિંગ શું થાય? મલ્ટીપર્પઝ. વર્સેટાઇલ can be used for a person as well as a place. Akshay Kumar is a versatile actor. Serious, funny, dramatic. અહીંયા meaning આપ્યો છે amphitheater, especially in Greek and Roman architecture. It's an open circular or oval building, round shape ની building હોય, with a central space surrounded by a tiers of seats for spectators for the presentation of dramatic or sporting events. Gladiator માં કેવું હોય? બેસવા માટે રાઉન્ડ બનેલી હોય seats અને વચ્ચે લોકો કરતા હોય. So that is called the amphitheater, right? Amphitheater and regular stadium માં difference એટલે કે amphitheaters are usually made of stone, પથ્થરથી બનેલા. કોલેજીસ માં બી જોવા મળે તમને, right? So built by the Romans in 19 AD, Roman લોકોએ બનાવ્યું. It became a fortress with 4 towers after the 5th century and was then transformed into a village containing more than 200 houses. એના અંદર જ એટલું મોટું હતું કે એના અંદર એ લોકોએ houses બનાવ્યા. With a growing interest in conservation during the 19th century, એટલે 200 વર્ષ પહેલા લોકો को उसको बचाने का शौक चढ़ा. Conservation is कि ये property बहुत historic है. It was converted back into an arena. उसको वापस arena यानी वापस stadium बनाया for the staging of bullfights. वहां पे bullfights conduct करने लगे, thereby returning the structure to its original use as a venue for public spectacles. लोगों के प्रदर्शन. Do you understand the word spectator and spectacles now? How it is connected? Another example is the imposing arena of Verona in northern Italy, with space for 30,000 spectators, which was built 60 years before the Arles amphitheater and 40 years before Rome's famous Colosseum. What is the Colosseum? Colosseum is, if you have seen it in Rome, agar aap Rome ko Google karte ho, so you can see that's a big broken statue. Not a statue, a stadium with big walls. જોયું છે કોઈએ? Right? So this is what that is a Colosseum. જોયું છે બધાએ? And the one we are talking about right now jo હતું ને Arles વાળું, Arles, that is the amphitheater. Can you see it? It has endured the centuries, यानी हजारों सालों से वो है, and is currently considered one of the world's prime sites for opera. आज भी वो स्टेडियम में लोग opera shows रखते हैं, thanks to its outstanding acoustics, because you can listen to it. Anything that we read here from this We saw some figures देखे हमने, examples of wide range. It's not about new stadiums, we are talking about old stadiums. So 16 is not the answer. ये दोनों stadium जो examples थे वो पुराने हैं. Complete the summary below. Roman stadium. So we have not read anything about this also. Have we read it or not? Right? The Roman stadiums of Europe have proved very versatile. The amphitheater of Arles, for example, was converted first into a dash. उसको किस चीज में convert किया गया था? Then into a residential area, and finally into an arena where spectators could watch dash. We just solved it. What was it? Look at, we're talking about the Roman Arles, right? कहाँ पे है? Arles is the best example. Arles को क्या बनाया गया सबसे पहले? It is the best example. Built by the Romans, it became a fortress. Fortress यानी एक किला बन गया. किला यानी war के time पे. उसके बाद उसको village बनाया. Village यानी क्या हुआ? Residential area. और उसके बाद क्या देखने के लिए बनाया? Arena for staging of bullfights. क्या देखने के लिए बनाया उसको? Bullfights. So now give me the next two answers. It was converted first into a dash. Fortress. That is your answer. Killa banai hune महल जो, right? Then into a residential area. That was a village. And finally into an arena where spectators could watch bullfights. Right? Next, meanwhile, the arena of Verona, one of the oldest Roman amphitheaters, is famous today as a venue where dash is performed. क्या देखने जाते हैं लोग? Opera. Right? Now, Lucca's amphitheater is not yet discussed, so we don't have answers for these. Okay, so Lucca is here. C paragraph. Let's read. To read it, Josh, can you read C paragraph? Josh, are you there?
The area in the center of Italian town of Lucca, known as the Piazza del Anfiteatro, is yet another impressive example of an amphitheater becoming absorbed into the fabric of the city. The site evolved in a similar way to ours and was progressively filled with buildings from the Middle Ages until the 19th century, variously used as houses, a salt depot, and a prison. But rather than reverting to an arena, it became a market square, designed by Romanticist architect Lorenzo Nottolini. Today, the ruins of the amphitheater remain embedded in the various shops and residences surrounding the public square.
The area in the center of the Italian town of Lucca, जो बीच का जो area है, known as the Piazza del Anfiteatro, is yet another impressive example of an amphitheater becoming absorbed into the fabric of the city. यानी ये amphitheater पूरा शहर के साथ mix हो गया. The site evolved in a similar ways as Arles. Arles की तरह ही ये चीज develop हुई. It was progressively filled with buildings from the Middle Ages. इस जगह में बीच में बहुत सारी buildings थी until the 19th century. That is 200 years ago. Variously used as houses. वहाँ पे घर बनाए. A salt depot. Salt depot यानी वहाँ पे salt का पूरा trade हो सके. And a prison. But rather than reverting it to an arena, उसको वापस arena बनाने की जगह, stadium बनाने की जगह इन्होंने क्या किया? It became a market square. पूरा market बना दिया. Designed by Romanticist architect Lorenzo Nottolini. और आज the ruins of the amphitheater, उसका जो ruins है, यानी जो खंडर बनी हुए जो parts है, remain embedded in the various shops. आज भी वहाँ पे दुकानें हैं and residences surrounding the public square. वहाँ पे लोग रहते भी हैं और दुकानें भी. चलो fill in the blanks. The site of Lucca's amphitheater has also been used for many purposes over the years, including the storage of dash. किस चीज का storage? Depot. What kind of depot it was? Salt, right? It is now a market square with dash and homes incorporated into the remains of the Roman amphitheater. दुकानें है और घर है. So what is the answer? With shops and homes. समझ पड़ी बताने? કેવી રીતે આવ્યો ચલો સમજીએ. અહીંયા લખેલું છે it became a salt depot એટલે salt નો storage માટે. So salt depot its ruin are various shops and residences. Residence નું keyword શું છે ત્યાં? Homes. તો એની સામે આન્સર શું છે? Shops. Anything from match the heading that we can match the section? No, not yet. Abhi tak we have just solved the first one. Right? Okay, next one. Komal, can you read the paragraph?
Yes, sir. There are many similarities between modern stadium and the ancient amphitheaters intended for games, but some of the flexibility was lost at the beginning of the 20th century. At stadium were developed using new products such as steel and reinforced concrete and made use of bright lights for nighttime matches.
Continue.
Many such stadiums are situated in suburban areas designed for sporting use only and surrounded by parking lots. These factors mean that they may not be as accessible to the general public, require more energy to run, and contribute to urban heat.
There are many similarities between modern stadiums and the ancient amphitheaters. वो जमाने के amphitheaters जो थे intended for games और आज के जमाने के stadiums में काफी सारी समानता है. But some of the flexibility was lost at the beginning of the 20th century. अभी recently कुछ flexibility कम हो गई. क्यों? As stadiums were developed using new products such as steel and reinforced concrete. Concrete और steel से बनाए गए. And they made use of bright lights for nighttime matches. Cricket stadium में क्या है? पूरा लाइटों से भरा हुआ है. Many such stadiums are situated in suburban areas. ये city नहीं लेकिन थोड़े दूर रहते हैं क्योंकि इतनी महंगी जगह उनको शहर में नहीं मिलेगी तो ऑब्वियसली वो सिटी के बाहर रहेंगे जहां पे लोग रहते हैं. Designed for sporting use only and surrounded by parking lots. तो उनको जगह बहुत मिलती है. So these factors mean that they may not be as accessible to the general public. यानी जनरल पब्लिक वहां पे पहुंच तक नहीं सकता और उसके ऊपर it require more energy to run and contribute to urban heat. यानी वो heat में भी contribute करता है. तो that is a negative factor. Anything? 15, 16 or 17? Any of the answers? एक specific period के बाद की है. Yes.
17.
17, right. It is a reference to the disadvantages of stadiums built in a certain era. तो certain era जब हम सोचते तो हमें लगता है कि कोई past era की बात हो रही है. यो हमारे जमाने के era की बात कर रहे हैं कि जो 20th century में बने हुए हैं यानी अभी जो बने हुए last 100 years में वो stadiums की negative बात की है. All right, let's read E paragraph. Priyanka, can you read E paragraph? Is Priyanka there? Okay. Beenal, you read.
Yes, sir. But many of today's most innovative architects see scope for the stadium to help improve the city. Among the current strategies, two seem to be having particular success: the stadium as an urban hub and as a power plant. There's a growing trend for stadiums to be equipped with public places and services that serve a function beyond sport, such as hotels, retail outlets, conference centers, restaurants and bars, children's playgrounds, and green space. Creating mixed-use development such as this reinforces compactness and multifunctionality, making more efficient use of land and helping to regenerate urban spaces. This opens the space up to families and a wider cross-section of society instead of catering only to sports people and supporters. There have been many examples of this in the UK. The mixed-use facilities at Wembley and Old Trafford have become a blueprint for many stadiums in the world.
What is a blueprint? A plan that other people can copy. That is a blueprint. But many, so we talked about the disadvantage. लेकिन many of today's most innovative architects, आज के जो नए creative architects बंदे हैं, see scope for the stadium to help improve the city. वो ऐसा सोचते कि stadium की वजह से city को improve किया जा सकता है. Among the current strategies, two seem to be having particular access. दो ऐसी strategy है. The stadium as an urban hub यानी city के लिए एक पूरा connecting and as a power plant. There's a growing trend for stadiums to be equipped with public spaces. Public space रहता है and services that serve a function beyond sports. सिर्फ sports नहीं, और भी चीजें जैसे such as hotels, retail outlets, conference centers. वहां पे उसी के अंदर स्टेडियम के अंदर ही इतना बड़ा स्टेडियम के उसी के अंदर stores है, hotels है, conference centers है, restaurants and bars है, children's playground and green space. Creating mixed use development such as this reinforces compactness, यानी compactness यानी वो जगह की जो problem है वो कम हो जाती है, and multifunctionality, making more efficient use of land, वही जमीन का अच्छा use हो and helping to regenerate urban spaces, यानी वही space को वापस अच्छे से हम use कर पाए. ये strategies वो आज के architects use कर रहे हैं. This opens the space up to families and a wider cross section of society. पूरी society के अलग-अलग लोग यहाँ पे आ सकते हैं, not just sports fan. Instead of catering only to sports people and supporters. There have been many examples of this in the UK. The mixed-use facilities in Wembley and Old Trafford have become a blueprint for many other stadiums in the world. These are the benefits of multifunctional things. Anything here that we get? Now it is 16, correct? Right? Examples of the wide range of facilities available at some new stadiums. All right, two more to go. Let's read F paragraph. Yes, Josh, can you read it, F paragraph?
The phenomena of stadiums as power stations has arisen from the idea that energy problems can be overcome by integrating interconnected buildings by means of a smart grid, which is an electricity supply network that uses digital communications technology to detect and react to local changes in usage without significant energy losses. Stadiums are ideal for these purposes because their canopies have a large surface area for fitting photovoltaic panels and rise high enough, more than 40 meters, to make use of micro wind turbines. Freiburg-Metz Solar Stadium in Germany is the first of a new wave of stadiums as a power plant, which also includes the Amsterdam Arena and the Kaohsiung Stadium, the latter inaugurated in 2009. Has 8,844 photovoltaic panels producing up to 1.14 GWh of electricity annually. This reduces the annual output of carbon dioxide by 660 tons and supplies up to 80% of the surrounding area when the stadium is not in use. This is proof that a stadium can serve its city and have a decidedly positive impact in terms of reduction of CO2 emissions.
The phenomenon is the trend of stadiums as power stations has arisen from the idea that energy problems can be overcome by integrating interconnected buildings by means of a smart grid. Electricity supply भी हम power generate कर सकते हैं, कहाँ से? Stadium से. which is an electricity supply network that uses digital communication technology to detect and react to local changes in usage without significant energy losses. So stadiums are ideal for these purposes. यानी stadiums को हम energy लेने के लिए, generate करने के लिए भी use करते हैं, because their canopies का क्या मीनिंग है, जो stadium के ऊपर जो छत लगी होती है जहां पे लोग बैठते हैं, तो उसके ऊपर तो छत लगी होती है, not the ground but where people are sitting, have a large surface area for fitting photovoltaic. What is photovoltaic? यानी ऐसी चीज, ऐसे panels जो लाइट एब्जॉर्ब कर से उसमें से वोल्टेज निकालते हैं. वोल्टेज इज इक्वल टू एनर्जी, दैट इज इलेक्ट्रिक सप्लाई. सो फोटोवोल्टेइक panels and rise high enough, they are at height also more than 40 meters, to make use of micro wind turbines. तो ये चीजें भी होती है वहां पे. So Freiburg Mage Solar Stadium in Germany is one of the first of a new wave of stadiums as power plants, which also includes the Amsterdam Arena and the Kaohsiung Stadium. So these are different places. The latter यानी जो बाद वाला है, inaugurated in 2009, had 8,844 photovoltaic panels producing this much of electricity, 1.14 GWh, that is gigawatt of energy annually. This reduces the annual output of carbon dioxide by 660 tons and supplies up to 80% of the surrounding area when the stadium is not in use. So that is the purpose of the stadium. This is proof that a stadium can serve its city and has a decidedly positive impact in terms of reduction in CO2 emissions. Do we see some figures here? क्या हमें numbers दिखाई दे रहे हैं इसके अंदर? We see stadiums. What are the figures? First one is 8,844 photovoltaic panels. Second figure, 1.1 GWH, right? So what is the answer here? Figures demonstrating the environmental benefits of a certain museum. So this is F, this was A, this was E, and this was A. So sporting arenas have always been central to the life and culture of cities. यानी sporting arenas हमेशा एक शहर का हिस्सा रहे. In every era, हर जमाने में the stadium has acquired new value and uses. Stadium का अलग-अलग purpose रहा है. For military fortress, यानी जब enemies attack करते हैं उसको पूरा कवच की तरह use करते हैं. To residential village, public space की तरह भी use करते हैं. To theater, and most recently a field of experimentation in advanced engineering. और आज के ज़माने में advanced engineering भी use करते हैं. The stadium of today now brings together multiple functions, thus helping cities to create a sustainable future. All right, so now when comparing 20th century stadiums to ancient amphitheaters in section D, which two negative features does the writer mention? सेक्शन डी में हमने जो फीचर्स देखे वो किस तरह से गलत थे, नेगेटिव थे कंपेयर टू द पास्ट. दे आर लेस इमेजिनेटिवली डिजाइन, उसमें कल्पना नहीं है. दे आर लेस स्पेशियस, स्पेस की कमी है. दे आर इन लेस कन्वीनियंट लोकेशन, वो उनको इनकन्वीनियंट लोकेशन पे बनाए गए हैं. दे आर लेस वर्सेटाइल यानी लेस मल्टीफंक्शनल, एंड दे आर मेड ऑफ लेस ड्यूरेबल मटेरियल्स. व्हाट आर द प्रॉब्लम्स? डू यू रिमेंबर? डी पैराग्राफ में ये पढ़ा हमने. क्या पढ़ा था कि जो नए से स्टेडियम्स आए उनको कैसे बनाया गया है. दे आर मेड यूजिंग न्यू प्रोडक्ट्स सच एज स्टील एंड रीइंफोर्स्ड कंक्रीट. तो ये ड्यूरेबल ही है, ड्यूरेबल नहीं है ऐसा तो नहीं है. एंड दे आर मेड यूजिंग दिस, लेकिन दे आर सिचुएटेड इन सबर्बन एरियाज जहां पे सिर्फ स्पोर्ट्स के लिए ही यूज होता है, पार्किंग के लिए. वहां पे कोई आता जाता नहीं है. एक प्रॉब्लम ये हो गया. दूसरा क्या है? They may not be accessible to the general public. वो public के लिए use नहीं होता है उतना. So some of the flexibility जो थी, यानी जो multi-purpose function था, was lost here because of the way it was made. So now tell me, what is the right answer? कोई imagination की बात की है? That they are less imaginatively designed? No. They are less spacious? No. They are in less convenient locations. They are in suburban areas where people don't use it. So one answer is they are less versatile. इसीलिए लोगों का उसका मतलब नहीं है. The answers are C and they're made of less durable material. The concrete is not less durable. Okay, so you can't say that answer is E. Last two questions. Which two advantages of modern stadium does the writer mention? Stadium की design में क्या फायदा है? Offering improved amenities for the enjoyment of sports events. Sports events को ज्यादा अच्छे से improve enjoy करने के लिए better facilities है stadium में. Bringing community life back into the city environment. Community life को वापस लाना है. Facilitating research into solar and wind energy solutions. Enabling local residents to reduce their energy consumption of electricity. Providing a suitable site for the installation of renewable power generators. Tough one, come on. What is it doing? Modern stadium design का क्या benefit है? क्या हो रहा है ये? One is here, providing a suitable site for the installation of renewable power generators, right? That is what the photovoltaic sheet. Remember that. And it is not letting them research into wind. So if you think C is the answer, C is the wrong answer. ये कोई research में help नहीं कर रहा. So it is not facilitating research. कोई research scientist लोग बैठ के वहाँ research नहीं कर रहे. But the correct answer is bringing community life back into the city. City में community life यानी लोग और ज़्यादा एक दूसरे से connect हो जाए. कहाँ लिखा है ये? एक तो लिखा है the stadium today brings together multiple functions, right? So it starts here, the main point here. Where was that, right? A sentence related to cross between families and age, people of all age. Here, this opens up space for families in a wider cross section of the society. So it brings the people together. Got it? In the second one. What is the second one? They have a place to install the here. Providing a suitable site for the installation of renewable power generators. Are we clear with all the answers now? Do you have any questions? All right, so reading passage 3, To Catch a King. Anarchy reviews Charles Spencer's book about the hunt for King Charles II during the English Civil War of the 17th century. So what year will be 17th century? 1600. 17th century कौन है के भाई? 1600. बराबर. All right, so let's start with the first paragraph. I want Josh to read it. Josh, can you read it?
Yes, sir. Charles Spencer's latest book, To Catch a King, tells us the story of the hunt for King Charles II in the 6 weeks after his resounding defeat at the Battle of Worcester in September 1651. And what a story it is. After his father was executed by the Parliamentarians in 1649, the young Charles II sacrificed one of the very principles his father had died for and did a deal with Scots, thereby accepting Presbyterianism as the national religion in return for being crowned King of Scots. His arrival in Edinburgh prompted the English parliamentary army to invade Scotland in a preemptive strike. This was followed by a Scottish invasion of England. The two sides finally faced one another at Worcester in the west of England in 1651. After being comprehensively defeated on the meadows outside the city by parliamentarian army, the 21-year-old king found himself the subject of a national manhunt, with a huge sum offered for his capture. Over the following 6 weeks, he managed, through a series of heart-poundingly close escapes, to evade the parliamentarians before seeking refuge in France. For the next 9 years, the penniless and defeated Charles wandered around Europe with only a small group of loyal supporters.
Charles Spencer is who is he? He is the writer of a book, and there's another person, Anna, who is reviewing the book. And यहाँ पे कहानी है किसकी? चार्ल्स की बुक की बात हो रही है, चार्ल्स स्पेंसर की बुक, जिसका नाम है टू कैच अ किंग. A very interesting story. It tells us about the story of the hunt for King Charles II in the 6 weeks after his resounding defeat at the Battle of Worcester. It's called Worcester. क्या बोलते हैं इसको? Worcester in September 1651. And what a story it is. यानी कितनी interesting story है. After his father was executed, जैसे Game of Thrones में Robert Baratheon को execute किया गया, his father was executed by the parliamentarians in 1649. The young Charles II sacrificed one of the very principles his father had died for and did a deal with the Scots. उस जमाने में स्कॉटिश लोगों को दुश्मन माना जाता, लेकिन उसके ही लोगों ने मार दिया, तो उसने उसके दुश्मनों के साथ दोस्ती की, thereby accepting Presbyterianism. उसका मीनिंग लिखा है नीचे. Presbyterianism is a part of the refined Protestant religion. So that is all Catholic people's fight. As the national religion in return for being crowned king of Scots. यानी वो राजा बनने के बदले में उसने उनका जो धर्म था क्रिश्चियनिटी का वो एक्सेप्ट किया. His arrival in Edinburgh, वो वापस एडिनबर्ग आया, prompted the English parliamentary army to invade Scotland. ये आर्मी ने उसको मारने के लिए स्कॉटलैंड में रेड की in a preemptive strike. Preemptive का मीनिंग होता है कि सामने वाला हम पे हमला करे उससे पहले हम उसके ऊपर अटैक कर दें. दैट इज कॉल्ड अ प्रीएम्प्टिव स्ट्राइक. क्योंकि उनको पता था कि इसके पापा को हमने मारा है, पिता को हमने मारा है, तो बेटा अटैक करने वाला है आर्मी लेके, तो उससे पहले हम अटैक करेंगे. एंड दिस वाज फॉलोड बाय अ स्कॉटिश इन्वेजन ऑफ इंग्लैंड. उसके बाद स्कॉटिश लोगों ने इंग्लैंड पे हमला किया. वो हमले को बोलते हैं इन्वेजन. The two sides finally faced one another at Worcester in the west of England in 1651. और ये दोनों साइड के अटैक के बाद एक दूसरे के सामने आ गए ये दोनों. कब? 1651. After being comprehensively defeated, बहुत बुरी तरह हारने के साथ on the meadows of outside the city by the parliamentarian army, यानी वो वापस हार गया चार्ल्स. The 21 year, उसकी एज कितनी थी तब? 21 years old. King found himself the subject of a national manhunt. लोग सब उसके पीछे, उसको ढूंढने के लिए पीछे पड़ गए. Just like Game of Thrones. Arya Stark, she was running after her father was killed, right? With a huge sum offered for his capture. उसको पकड़ने के लिए बहुत बड़ा इनाम था. Over the following 6 weeks, he managed through a series of heart-poundingly close escapes. यानी दिल को डरा देने वाली घटनाओं में 6 हफ्ते तक वो भागता रहा, बचता रहा, to evade the parliamentarians before seeking refuge in France. लेकिन finally उसको पनाह मिली फ्रांस, वहां पे छुप गया. For the next 9 years, और फिर अगले 9 सालों तक, the penniless and defeated Charles, एकदम गरीब Charles, wandered around Europe with only a small group of loyal supporters. बहुत कम supporters थे, और वो राजा ऐसे ही, जो प्रिंस था, वो ऐसे ही घूमता रहा. So that is the story. All right, so we have the story behind the hunt for Charles II. So now you have summary completion with words. यहाँ पे आपको words भी उठाने हैं. तो हमारे पास words है from A to J. Write the correct letter in boxes 27 to 31 on your answer sheet. The story behind the hunt for Charles II. तो यहाँ पे options क्या है पहले पढ़ते हैं. Military innovation, large reward, हमने पढ़ा है अभी, large reward. Widespread conspiracy, यानी बहुत फैली हुई साजिश. Relative safety, new government, decisive victory, political debate. Strategic alliance, यानी किसी के साथ प्लान किया हुआ संगठन, that is strategic alliance. Popular solution and religious conviction, यानी आपका जो धार्मिक जो मानना है, that is called religious conviction. Charles II's father was executed by the parliamentarian forces in 1649. Charles II then formed a dash. उसने क्या बनाया?
Strategic alliance.
Exactly. उसने क्या बनाया? He formed a strategic alliance. Answer is only H. So what is the word for strategic alliance? हमने ऊपर देखा. उसने क्या form किया था? Scottish लोगों के साथ. Here it is. He did a deal with the Scots. क्या किया उसने? He made a deal. So what is the answer here? Strategic alliance. अभी डायरेक्ट कीवर्ड नहीं मिला हम, तो अगर हम पूरे पैसेज को समझेंगे नहीं तो राइट आंसर नहीं मिलेगा. With the Scots, in order to become king of Scots, he abandoned an important dash. उसने बहुत important चीज को छोड़ दिया. किस चीज को छोड़ा उसने? उसने खुद का धार्मिक चीज को छोड़ दिया ना. So answer is J, religious conviction. મેળું બધાને શું લખેલું આપણે હમણાં જ રીડ કર્યું. Thereby accepting Presbyterianism as the national religion, so that is he changed his religion. That was held by his father and had contributed to his father's death. The opposing side, सामने वाली sides, then met outside Worcester in 1651. The battle led to a dash for the parliamentarians. Parliamentarians जीते थे या हारे थे? Yes, it led to a decisive victory. Answer is F. वो लोग जीते थे. And Charles had to flee for his life. उसके जान को बचाने के लिए उसे वहां से भागना पड़ा. A dash was offered for Charles' capture. एक इनाम रखा था. Answer इनाम के लिए कौन सा word? A large reward was offered. But after 6 weeks spent in hiding, छुपने के बाद, he eventually managed to reach the dash of continental Europe. कहाँ पहुंचा वो? Where did he reach? He reached वो फ्रांस में कहाँ पहुंचा था? किस लिए पहुंचा था? पनाह मिली. He managed to reach the relative safety of continental Europe. What was that? That was France. So where is it? Look at it. उन्होंने क्या देखा था? Look at a huge sum offered for his capture. तो उसके लिए कौन सा वर्ड दिया गया है? A large reward. Reward છે ને? શું લખેલું છે અહીંયા? Large reward. પછી decisive victory માટે કયો कीवर्ड હતો? Decisive victory यानी कैसी विक्ट्री? बहुत पक्की विक्ट्री थी. यहाँ पे लिखा है after being comprehensively defeated, बहुत बुरी तरह हारने के बाद. यानी अगर ये लोग बहुत बुरी तरह हारे तो ऑपोजिट है. अगर वो लोग बहुत बुरी तरह हारे तो यहाँ पे बहुत अच्छी तरह it better led to a dash for the parliamentarian. The opposite, decisive victory. You get it? Sometimes you get the opposite word. Are we clear till here, everyone? All right. Okay, Drashti, can you read the next paragraph? Drashti, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. From here, niche thi, years later.
Years
Drashti, आवाज નથી આવતો. Hello.
Yes, sir. 1 minute. Years later, after his restoration as king, the 50 years old Charles II requested a meeting with the writer and dearest Samuel Pepys. His intention when asking Pepys to commit his story to paper was to ensure that this most extraordinary episode was never forgotten. Over 2-3 hour settings, the king related to him in great detail his personal recollections of the 6 weeks he had spent as a fugitive. As the king and secretary settled down. Charles commenced his story after the battle was so absolutely lost as to be beyond hope of recovery. I began to think of the best way of saving myself.
50 years later, सालों बाद, after his restoration as a king, वो वापस राजा बन गए, यानी वो जीत के राजा बन गए. तो उन्होंने क्या किया? The 50-year-old Charles, यानी तब उनकी उम्र हो गई थी 50. He requested a meeting with the writer and diarist. Diarist is somebody who writes diary. Samuel Pepys. His intention was asking Pepys to commit his story to paper, was to ensure that this most extraordinary episode was never forgotten. राजा को जो ये पूरी घटना थी कि उसके पापा को मार दिया, वो फ्रांस भाग गया और फिर वापस वॉर लड़ा और वापस जीत के वो वापस राजा बना, ये कहानी कोई भूल ना जाए, तो he wanted people to remember it. Commit his story to paper, यानी उसको वो इतिहास में डालनी थी कहानी, to ensure that this most extraordinary episode was never forgotten. Over 2-3 hour sitting, 3 घंटा 2 बार बैठ के, the king related to him in great detail his personal recollection of the 6 weeks he had spent as a fugitive. Fugitive का meaning होता है भगोड़ा. ભગોડા is a person who runs away. જે ફરાર થઈ જાય ને જેને લોકો શોધતા હોય તેને શું કહેવાય? A fugitive. As the king and secretary settled down, a scene that is surely a gift for a future script writer, Charles commenced the story. उन्होंने अपनी कहानी बताना चालू किया. After the battle was so absolutely lost, बहुत बुरी तरह हम युद्ध हार गए, as to be beyond hopes of recovery. हमने कभी कल्पना भी नहीं की कभी हम वापस जीत पाएंगे. I began to think of the best ways of saving myself. मैंने सोचा कि मैं खुद को कैसे बचाऊं. Reading further. Priyanka, can you read?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
One of the joys of Spencer's book, a result not least of his use of Charles True's own narrative as well as those of his supporters, is just how close the reader gets to the action. The day-by-day retelling of the fugitives' doings provides delicious details. The cutting of the king's long hair with agriculture cells, the use of walnut leaves to dye his pale skin, and the days Charles spent lying on a branch of the great oak tree in the Bosable wood at the parliamentary soldiers scorched the forest floor below. Spencer's draw out both the humors such as the precipitous refusals of Charles' friend Henry Wilmot to adopt disguise on the grounds that it was beneath his dignity, and the emotional tension when the secret of the king's presence was consciously revealed to his supporters.
So one of the joys of Spencer's book, ये book की अच्छी बात थी, a result not least of its use of Charles II's own narrative as well as those of his supporter, is just how close the readers get to the action. यानी उन्होंने इतना अच्छे से लिखा है कि readers can feel a slice of action. The day by day retelling, यानी हर एक दिन की कहानी है उसके अंदर, retelling of the fugitives' doings, यानी उन्होंने जो लोग भाग गए थे चार्ल्स के साथ, उनके जो करतूतें थी, provides delicious details. The cutting of the king's long hair, राजा को अपने लंबे बाल कट करने पड़े. With agricultural shears, यानी वो खेतीबाड़ी के जो चाकू होते उससे उनके बाल कट करने पड़े. The use of walnut leaves, walnut के leaves को use करना to dye his pale skin, यानी स्किन जो थी उनकी बहुत गोरे थे, तो उन्होंने वो लीव्स लेके उनकी स्किन को थोड़ा डार्क कर दिया. And the day Charles spent lying on a branch of a great oak tree, एक झाड़ के ऊपर बैठे रहे in Boscobel wood as the parliamentary soldiers scoured, यानी जब वहां पे उस जगह पे जब soldiers ढूंढने को आए वो एक पेड़ के ऊपर छुप गए, scoured the forest floor below. ये सारे एक एक किस्से उन्होंने बुक में लिखे. Spencer draws out both the humor, such as the preposterous refusal of Charles' friend Henry Wilmot to adopt disguise on the grounds that it was beneath his dignity. उन्होंने बहुत सारी फनी चीजें भी लिखी, जैसे चार्ल्स जो राजा थे, उनका एक फ्रेंड था जिसने मना कर दिया कि मैं अपना भेष बदलने वाला नहीं हूं, मैं अपना रूप बदलने वाला नहीं हूं. Right? And the emotional tension when the secret of the king's presence was cautiously revealed to his supporters. जैसे वो राजा के जो सपोर्टर्स था, जब उनको पता चलता था कि हमारे राजा अभी जिंदा है, तो वो जो इमोशनल टेंशन, वो सारी चीजें उन्होंने उनकी इसके अंदर लिखी. King's Charles' adventures after losing the Battle of Worcester, उनका जो एडवेंचर था, यानी ये वॉर हारने के बाद, हाइड द अनकंफर्टेबल ट्रूथ दैट whilst almost everyone in England had been appalled by the execution of his father, उसके फादर की डेथ से सबको झटका लगा. They had not welcomed the arrival of his son with the Scots army. जब वो सामने वाले दुश्मन आर्मी के साथ जुड़ गया, वो चीज लोगों ने एक्सेप्ट नहीं की, but had instead firmly bolted their doors. उन्होंने लोगों ने वो दरवाजा बंद कर दिया कि उसको हम कोई तरह का सपोर्ट नहीं करें. This was partly because he rode at the head of what looked like a foreign invasion force, and partly because after almost a decade of civil war, people were desperate to avoid its beginning again. यानी उनको पता था कि ये दुश्मनों के साथ जोड़ बैठा है, दुश्मनों के साथ यानी स्कॉटिश लोगों के साथ हाथ मिला लिया है, तो वो लोगों को अच्छा नहीं लगा. उनको लगा कि इसकी वजह से वापस वॉर आए, तो लोगों को वॉर चाहिए नहीं था, क्योंकि इट हैड बीन जस्ट अ डेकेड, यानी 10 साल पहले एक वॉर खत्म हुआ. This makes it all the more interesting that Charles II himself loved the story so much ever after. यही कारण की वजह से वो राजा को खुद की कहानी इतनी अच्छी लगती थी. As well as retelling it, एक तो लोगों को सुनाने के साथ साथ, to anyone who would listen, causing eye rolling among courtiers, वो लोगों को सुनाते और लोग शॉक हो जाते थे. He set in train a series of initiatives to memorialize it. उसको याद रखने के लिए उन्होंने बहुत सारे steps लिए. There was to be a new order of chivalry. Chivalry is a group of knights, यानी उनके पूरे लोगों के ऐसे ग्रुप बनाया, the Knights of Royal Oak. A series of enormous oil paintings, बड़ी-बड़ी paintings का ऑर्डर दिया, depicting the episode were produced. यानी ये कहानी को बताने के लिए उन्होंने paintings बनवाई, including a 2-meter wide canvas, पूरा canvas बनाया of Boscobel wood, वही पेड़ जिसके ऊपर वो छुपे थे, उसी पेड़ का लकड़े के साथ उन्होंने पेंटिंग बनाई. And set of 6 similarly enormous paintings, 6 बड़ी-बड़ी painting of the return of the king on the run. In 1660, Charles II commissioned, उन्होंने पैसे दिए, the artist John Michael Wright to paint a flying squadron of cherubs. Cherubs का meaning है an image of angelic children used in paintings. छोटे-छोटे बच्चे होते हैं जो परियों का रूप लेते हैं, वैसी paintings बनाने का. A flying squadrons of cherub carrying an oak tree. ऐसे छोटे-छोटे परियां जो है वो लकड़ा लेके उड़ रही है to the heavens on the ceiling of his bed chamber, कि वो लकड़ा उसके रूम में ला रहा है ऐसा. It is hard to imagine many other kings marking the lowest point in their life. ऐसा बहुत कम देखने को मिलता है कि जो लाइफ का सबसे जो गंदा, सबसे जो छोटा, यानी जो सबसे बुरा वक्त है, उसको इस राजा ने इतने अच्छे से गर्व के साथ लोगों के सामने दिखाया. The lowest point of their life so enthusiastically, or indeed pulling off such an escape in the first place. तो पहली बात तो कि इतना बड़ा लाइफ को जो जान को खतरा था वो टाल के उन्होंने वापस वो राजा बने, वो कहानी ही एक इंटरेस्टिंग थी, और उनके लाइफ का सबसे जो गंदा पीरियड था वो उन्होंने इतने अच्छे से बताया. चार्ल्स स्पेंसर, नाउ ये चार्ल्स अलग है, he is the writer of the book, is the perfect person to pass the story on to the new generation. वो नई जनरेशन को ये कहानी देने के लिए सबसे सही बंदा है. Is pacey यानी very slow, धीरे धीरे, pace हो, that is pace, step by step. Readable prose steers deftly clear of modern idioms. उसमें modern idioms नहीं है. Elegantly brings to life the detail of the great. बहुत details में अच्छे से वो कहानी समझाते हैं. He has even handed sympathy for both the fugitive king and the fierce republican regime that haunted him. उसने दया भी बताई दोनों साइड पे, राजा की साइड पे, उसको मारने वालों की साइड पे. And he succeeds in his desire to explore far more of the background of the story than previous books on the subject had done. और वो ऐसा बैकग्राउंड दिखाते हैं वो स्टोरी के बारे में जो आज तक किसी ने नहीं दिखाया. Indeed, the opening third of the book का जो third part of the book is about how Charles II found himself at Worcester in the first place, which for some will be reason alone to read To Catch a King. The name of the book is To Catch a King. The tantalizing question left, यानी एक ललचाने वाला जो question जो रह जाता है in the end is that of what it all meant. इसका क्या अर्थ है? Would Charles II have been a different king had these 6 weeks never happened? क्या वो कुछ अलग प्रकार के राजा बनते अगर इनके साथ ये सारी घटनाएं नहीं होती? The days and nights spent in hiding must have affected him in some way. कुछ ना कुछ तरीके से वो जो जब छुपे थे लोगों की हेल्प ले रहे थे तब उनका कुछ ना कुछ नजरिया बदला होगा. Did the need to assume disguises, जब उनको पूरा अपना रूप बदलना पड़ा, भेष बदलना पड़ा, चेहरा ढकना पड़ा, जब वो करना पड़ा, the need to assume disguises to survive on wit, दिमाग लड़ा के बुद्धि दिमाग लड़ाई ने हमने survive करવું પડ્યું, and charm alone to use trickery and subterfuge to escape from tight corners help form him and Tyner's help form him. ये सब करने से वो जान बचा के भागे, रूप बदला, क्या उससे उनका पूरा पर्सनालिटी का विकास हुआ? This is the one area where the book doesn't quite hit the mark. तो ये जो एरिया है जिसके ऊपर इतना हम नहीं समझ पाते. Instead, its depiction, यानी ये जिस तरह से चार्ल्स II को दर्शाता है in his final years as an ineffective, pleasure-loving monarch, कि यानी वो लास्ट ईयर्स में इतना असरदार नहीं थे, उनको सिर्फ एंजॉय करना था. monarch यानी a ruler doesn't do justice to the man. तो ये जो है वो राजा को न्याय नहीं देता, यानी ये गलत लिखा है जो राइटर ने लिखा है. neither is it accurate, और ये सही भी नहीं है कि वो ऐसे नहीं थे. or to the complexity of his character, यानी ये जस्टिस नहीं देता है कि वो इतने कॉम्प्लेक्स आदमी थे तो वो इतना सिंपल आप लिखो वो गलत है. but this is one niggle aside. To Catch a King is an excellent read. फिर भी ये बहुत अच्छी बुक है. And those who come to it knowing little of the famous tale, जिसको इस कहानी के बारे में बहुत कम पता है, will find they have a treat in store. उनको पढ़ने में बहुत मजा आएगा. So here are the questions. All right, so first question, yes, no, and not given. Charles chose Pepys for the task because he considered him trustworthy. वो उन्हें भरोसेमंद मानते थे इसीलिए उसको बुक लिखने के लिए बुलाया. यहाँ पे लिखा है उन्होंने he requested a meeting with the writer and diarist Samuel Pepys. उसका इरादा ये था कि उनकी कहानी को याद रखे लोग. क्या वो भरोसेमंद था इसलिए राजा ने उसे चूज किया था? Not given. The first answer is not given. Charles' personal recollection of the escape lacked sufficient detail. राजा ने जो स्टोरी बताई उसमें बहुत डिटेल नहीं थी. राजा ने बहुत डिटेल में 3-3 घंटे बैठ के पूरी एक-एक चीज डिटेल में बताई थी. हमने अभी पढ़ा, कहाँ पे पढ़ा? यहाँ पे लिखा है look at it is written here. Over 2-3 hours sittings, the king related to him in great detail his personal recollection. राजा को जो याद था वो हर चीज उन्होंने बहुत डिटेल में विस्तार में बताई. Answer for 33. So no. No खबर पड़ी कैम? Because it did not lack detail. It had lot of detail. Charles indicated to Pepys, उन्होंने राइटर को ये भी बताया that he had planned his escape before the battle. उन्होंने जो बैटल था उसके बाद उनको कैसे भागना है बैटल के बाद वो उन्होंने ऑलरेडी प्लान कर दिया था बैटल होने से पहले. इट इज गिवन. वो युद्ध लड़े तो जब युद्ध लड़े थे तब तो उन्होंने मेंटली ऐसा थोड़ी सोचा था कि मैं हारने वाला हूं फिर मैं भाग जाऊंगा. तो उन्होंने लिखा है कि जैसे ही वो बैटल हारे तो उन्होंने उस समय क्या किया, यहाँ पे लिखा है, लुक एट. After the battle was so absolutely lost, हारने के बाद to beyond hope, मैं सोच भी नहीं सकता कि हम कभी वापस रिकवर कर पाएंगे. I began to think of the best way of saving myself. तब मैं सोचने लगा कि मैं खुद को कैसे बचाऊंगा। वो ऑब्वियसली बिफोर द वॉर तो वो थोड़ी भागने का प्लान कर रहे थे, वो हार गए तब उन्होंने सोचा। सो आंसर इज, it is given, so you can't say not given. Your answer is no, a big fat no. Charles indicated to Pepys that he had planned. He had not planned it. After the battle was lost, he planned it. The inclusion of Charles' account is a positive aspect of the book. उसमें जो उन्होंने जो किस्से सुनाए हैं वो बुक का पॉजिटिव हिस्सा है। यहां पे लिखा है, look at. The tantalizing question left is in the end is that what is, or would Charles have been a different king? And उन्होंने जो बोला है, यहाँ पे लिखा है, he has even-handed sympathy for both the fugitive king, उनकी king की भी स्टोरी दिखी है, he succeeds in his desire to explore far more than the background. और दूसरी बात, one of the joys of Spencer's book, a result not least of its use of Charles II's own narrative, ये सबसे अच्छा बात कि चार्ल्स ने, रीडर के लिए जो अच्छी बात है वो ये है कि चार्ल्स राजा ने खुद के किस्से लिखे हैं, ये एक पॉजिटिव बात है। व्हाट इज द आंसर? द इंक्लूजन ऑफ चार्ल्स अकाउंट is a positive aspect of the book. The answer is yes, it is a positive part. All right, so now we have your favorite activity, MCQs. तो यहाँ पे आपको सिर्फ करेक्ट आंसर नहीं बोलना है, आपको ये भी बोलना है कि ये जो ऑप्शंस है वो कौन से गलत है या नॉट गिवन। What is the reviewer's main purpose or in the first paragraph? पहले पैराग्राफ में रिव्यूअर का मेन पर्पस क्या है? उन्होंने क्या किया, पूरी उनकी स्टोरी बताई राजा की। To describe what happened during the Battle of Worcester, to give an account of the circumstances leading to Charles II's escape, किस घटना की वजह से उनको भागना पड़ा ये बता रहे हैं। To provide details of the parliamentarians' political view, उनका political view की डिटेल दिखा रहा है। To compare Charles' belief, उनकी जो बिलीफ थी और उनके पिता की जो बिलीफ थी उनको कंपेयर कर रहे हैं। What is the answer? ये स्टोरी क्या बता रही है? फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ हमने जो अभी पढ़ा, यहाँ पे हमें पूरी कहानी बताई गई कि ये था, ये राजा था, ये बुक के बारे में बताई गई और वहां पे राजा को भागना पड़ा और किस हालत में भागना पड़ा। तो ये स्टोरी है ए और बी नाउ। सो वन थिंग इज वेरी क्लियर, सी देयर इज नो कंपैरिजन बिटवीन देयर बिलीफ्स, राइट? एक छोटा सा सेंटेंस है, सो डी इज नॉट द आंसर। पार्लियामेंट का पॉलिटिकल व्यू, दैट इज आल्सो नॉट डिस्कस्ड। अभी कंफ्यूजन है कि क्या हमें वॉर की डिटेल मिल रही है या ये रीजन बता रहा है, टू गिव एन अकाउंट ऑफ द सर्कमस्टेंसेस लीडिंग टू चार्ल्स एस्केप, तो उसको भागना क्यों पड़ा, वो मेन फोकस है। सो योर करेक्ट आंसर इज बी। समझ पड़ा बताना? व्हाई बी इज द आंसर? व्हाई डज द रिव्यूअर इंक्लूड एग्जांपल्स ऑफ द फ्यूजिटिव्स बिहेवियर इन द थर्ड पैराग्राफ? वो थर्ड पैराग्राफ में जो उसके साथ लोग भागे थे उनका बिहेवियर क्यों बताता है? यहाँ पे थर्ड पैराग्राफ में क्या लिखा है कि उनको भागने के साथ अपना भेष बदलना पड़ा, उसके फ्रेंड ने अपना रूप बदलने से मना कर दिया, राइट? और जो जो लोगों को पता चला कि ये राजा है वो लोग देख के एकदम इमोशनल हो गए। तो ये तीन चीज उसने क्यों बताई, ये तीन एग्जांपल्स क्यों बताए? व्हाई डज द रिव्यूअर इंक्लूड एग्जांपल्स ऑफ द फ्यूजिटिव्स बिहेवियर इन द थर्ड? टू एक्सप्लेन हाउ क्लोज चार्ल्स सेकंड केम टू लूजिंग हिज लाइफ, ये बताने के लिए वो कितना बाल बाल बचे मरने से। To suggest that Charles' two supporters were badly prepared, ये बताने के लिए कि वो लोग ठीक से तैयार नहीं थे। To illustrate how the events of the 6 weeks are brought to life, ये बताने के लिए कि वो जो उनके जो 6 हफ्ते थे वो कैसे जीवित हुए। And to argue that certain aspects are not as well known as they should be, ये बताने के लिए राइटर ये बताना चाहता है कि जो घटनाएं हुई थी उसको ठीक से अभी तक नहीं बताया गया है, वो बताना चाहता है। So what is the answer? The answer is C, yes. To illustrate how the events of the 6 weeks are brought to life. Brought to life यानी ये हमको पूरी बुक कैसे ऐसे जिंदा हो जाती है, तो ये किससे बना के हमारे लिए उन्होंने बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग बना दिया। तो ये लिखा है यहाँ पे कि वन ऑफ द जॉयज, जो चीज इसको इंटरेस्टिंग बताती है वो पूरी स्टोरी है यहाँ पे, रीटेलिंग। and here are the 3 examples. तो इससे हम वो इमेजिन कर सकते हैं कि उनके साथ वो 6 हफ्ते कैसे रहे होंगे. समझ पड़े छे? All right. What point does the reviewer make about Charles II in the 4th paragraph? उसके बारे में वो 4th paragraph में क्या point बताता है? 4th paragraph means this one, कि उसका जो एडवेंचर था here, लोग उसका सपोर्ट नहीं करना चाहते हैं, उनको इतनी तकलीफ पड़ी और इसकी वजह से ये बुक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है और चार्ल्स को खुद को ये बुक पसंद है और उनकी ये डार्क स्टोरी, ये नेगेटिव स्टोरी पसंद है और ऐसा कोई राजा नहीं होगा जो इतना नेगेटिव पार्ट को इतना हाईलाइट करेगा. और उन्हें हाईलाइट करने के लिए पेंटिंग्स बनाई, उनको पूरी शिवलरी बनाई, आर्मी बनाई. तो व्हाट इज इट फॉर 4th paragraph? He chose to celebrate what was essentially a defeat. वो ये सेलिब्रेट करना चाहते थे कि वो हार को सेलिब्रेट करना चाहते थे. He misunderstood the motives of his opponents. वो अपने दुश्मनों के इरादे को गलत समझे. He aimed to restore people's faith in the monarchy. वो लोगों का जो विश्वास था राजा में वो वापस लगाना चाहते थे. He was driven by a desire to be popular. वो बस फेमस होना चाहते थे. क्या करना चाहते थे? What was important? ये सब उन्होंने क्या किया? यहाँ पे लिखा है, It is hard to imagine many other kings marking the lowest point of their life so enthusiastically or indeed pulling off. कि एक तो वो हार गए, जान बची, लेकिन ऐसा बहुत रेयर होता है कि कोई अपनी हार को ऐसे बताता है. So answer is very simple. It is A. He chose to celebrate what was essentially a defeat. उन्होंने अपनी हार को सेलिब्रेट किया. And what does the reviewer say about Charles Spencer in the 5th paragraph? 5th paragraph में चार्ल्स स्पेंसर के बारे में क्या बताया गया है? यहाँ पे लिखा है this one. क्या लिखा गया है कि he is the perfect, इस जनरेशन के लिए वो परफेक्ट है क्योंकि उन्होंने नए नए इडियम्स यूज नहीं किए हैं. उन्होंने दोनों के लिए सिंपैथी और बैलेंस बना के रखा है. He succeeds in his desire to explore. वो बैकग्राउंड को इतने अच्छे से बताते हैं जो किसी ने नहीं बताया है. एंड इंडीड उनकी बुक की जो ओपनिंग है वो इतनी इंटरेस्टिंग है कि कोई भी आदमी पढ़ने के लिए रेडी हो जाएगा. तो राइटर ने चार्ल्स स्पेंसर के बारे में हमें क्या बोला है? His decision to write the book comes as a surprise. हमें झटका लगता है जब हमें पता चलता है कि ये आदमी इसके लिए लिख रहा है. He takes an unbiased approach to the subject matter. वो इस सब्जेक्ट को पूरी तरह फेयरली जज करते हैं, उसमें जरा भी भेदभाव नहीं करते हैं. His description of events would be better if they included more detail. कि अगर उसने ज्यादा डिटेल्स लिखी होती तो अच्छा रहता. या फिर he chooses language that is suitable for 21st century audience. 39. What is remarkable about it? Remarkable बात ये है कि उन्होंने पूरा बैलेंस करके लिखा है. आंसर इज बी. डिटेल तो उन्होंने दी है भर भर के, तो ये नहीं चाहिए. उनका सरप्राइज, देयर इज नथिंग मेंशन दैट इट इज अ सरप्राइज टू अस. He chooses language is just one point, but overall what he's saying, यहाँ पे क्या लिखा है? Read. He has even-handed sympathy. Even-handed is a balanced sympathy for both. उन्होंने राजा के लिए भी लिखा है, लेकिन fierce Republican regime के लिए भी लिखा है जो उसका शिकार कर रही थी. He succeeds in his desire to explore. तो पूरा बैलेंस देता है. And last question. When the reviewer says the book doesn't quite hit the mark, जब वो राइटर ये बोलता है कि बुक डजंट हिट द मार्क, वो किस चीज के बारे, शी इज मेकिंग द पॉइंट दैट, वो कौन सी चीज के बारे में बोल रहा था? यहाँ पे लुक एट, यहाँ पे लिखा था कि बुक अच्छी है लेकिन, आई हाईलाइट द एग्जैक्ट वर्ड, कि डिड द नीड, कि उन्होंने जो भेष बदला, उन्होंने जो अपने दिमाग को लड़ा के खुद को सर्वाइव किया, चालाकी की, सब्टरफ्यूज किया टू एस्केप, क्या इससे उनको मदद मिली? This is one of the area where the book doesn't hit the mark. ये एक एरिया है जो ज्यादा ध्यान नहीं देता है, यानी कि ये एक्सपीरियंस ने उन्हें किस तरह से बदला, उनका व्यवहार कैसे चेंज हुआ, वो हमें नहीं बताता. She is making the point that it overlooks the impact of events on ordinary people. लोगों के ऊपर जो हुआ उसको वो इग्नोर करता है. It lacks an analysis of prevalent views on monarchy. राजाशाही जो मोनार्की होती है उसके ऊपर का एनालिसिस के व्यू में वो कमजोर पड़ता है। मोनार्की के बारे में कोई डिस्कशन नहीं है। It omits any references to the deceit practiced by Charles II during his time in hiding. जब वो छुपे थे और जो जिस तरह से लोगों को वो मूर्ख बना के वो सरवाइव करते थे उसके बारे में कोई रेफरेंस नहीं है। It fails to address whether Charles II's experience had a lasting influence on him. क्या उस चीज का उसके ऊपर लंबे टाइम तक असर रहा था या नहीं, वो बताने में ये बुक फेल होती। So what's the answer? A, B, C or D? Exactly, the answer is B. It fails to address whether Charles II's experience had a lasting influence on him. क्या उसका उसके ऊपर सालों तक असर रहा, ये हमें बताता नहीं है। यही लिखा है कि ये जो था, this is it. Did the need to assume the days and nights spent in hiding must have affected him in some way. कुछ तो उनके ऊपर असर रहा था। So वो बुक नहीं बताती है, सिर्फ उनके बारे में बोलती है। So that is it. So that is the end of this reading passage.